Welcome back to Char TV, lads. Can you feel that Halloween chill in the air? The nights are getting colder, leaves are falling, and that eerie sense of the season is creeping in. Halloween is upon us, and with it, that thrill we all feel this time of year. I really love Halloween and the feeling it gives us. I'm Mason, and tonight we're diving into some truly terrifying stories, tales of horror that all take place on Halloween night. Also, I just want to say how grateful we are for all the incredible support you've been showing us here at Char TV. We're so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and it would mean the world if you could help us get there. Hit subscribe and join us on this eerie journey together, one that's only just beginning. Now get ready for some Halloween night stories that are sure to give you that Halloween feeling. This happened to me a few years ago on Halloween night. I had just moved into a new neighborhood on the outskirts of town, where the houses were spaced a little further apart and the streets were quiet, especially at night. Being new to the area, I didn't expect many trick-or-treaters, but I stocked up on candy just in case. It was around 8 p.m. when the first group of kids came by. I handed out some candy and they happily ran off into the night. The next hour was pretty quiet, with just a few straggling kids here and there. By 10 p.m. I figured the night was over and started winding down. I turned off the porch light, locked the doors, and settled on the couch to watch a horror movie. Then, just as the movie started to get intense, there was a single heavy knock on my door. Startled, I paused the movie and glanced at the clock. It was almost 11. Halloween or not, it was late for anyone to be out, especially kids. I got up and cautiously walked to the front door, checking the peephole. The porch light was off, so I couldn't see anything clearly, just the faint outline of someone standing still, very still, at my door. "Hello?" I called out, hoping they'd say something or just go away. Silence. I figured it was just some teenager pulling a prank, so I ignored it and went back to my movie. But as I sat down, another single knock echoed through the house. This time it was louder, almost angry. Uneasy, I got up again and looked through the peephole. This time I could see a bit more. Whoever was there wore a dark hoodie, and their face was hidden. They were close enough that I could hear their breathing, slow and heavy. I tried to sound confident as I called out, "Go away or I'm calling the cops." Still, nothing. No movement, no response, just that breathing. I was getting genuinely freaked out. I backed away from the door and decided to call the police, but as soon as I picked up my phone, my living room window rattled. I turned and saw the same hooded figure standing just outside, staring in. His face was pale, almost ghostly in the dim light from my TV, and he was grinning, a wide, unsettling grin that sent chills down my spine. I stumbled back, panic taking over. I moved towards the kitchen, hoping to grab a knife or something, but as soon as I did, he started pounding on the window, louder and louder, each hit more frantic, more desperate, and then, just as suddenly, he stopped. I froze, listening to the silence, my heart pounding. I crept back to the window to see if he was still there, but the yard was empty. I was alone, or so I thought. Thinking he had finally left, I relaxed a little, though I still felt uneasy. I called my friend, hoping for some company, and stayed on the phone watching the front door and window. But as we were talking, I heard it, a faint scraping sound, like something dragging against the floor. I looked down and felt my blood run cold. A note had been slipped under the front door. It read, "I love Halloween. See you next year." I immediately called the police, who came and searched the area, but they didn't find anyone. They told me it was probably just a prank, but it didn't feel like one. I barely slept that night. And on Halloween night every year since, I make sure my lights are off, my doors are locked, and my phone is in hand, because whoever was out there, I don't think they were kidding about coming back. Sometimes Halloween isn't just a night for scares, costumes, and candy. Sometimes the horror you experience is all too real, and the things that go bump in the night aren't just part of the festivities. As Halloween night approaches, remember to stay safe and maybe think twice before opening that door. A few years back, my friends and I went to a huge Halloween party at a friend's apartment complex. It was one of those places with a rooftop space, and the host had rented it out, filling it with decorations and lights. turning the usually quiet rooftop into a full-on Halloween bash. It was the kind of night that felt charged with excitement, the chilly October air, people dressed up, laughter and music filling the air. Everyone went all out with their costumes, but around 10 p.m. someone showed up who immediately caught everyone's attention. He was dressed as a demon, but not like the plastic, goofy kind. This costume looked disturbingly real. His skin was an ashy, leathery black, with jagged horns that jutted from his forehead, and his face was elongated, almost skeletal. He stood taller than anyone else there, and the detail on his face made it look almost organic. Even the eyes, dark and reflective, had this eerie depth that felt unsettling to look at. At first, we assumed he was part of the party's entertainment, a hired actor to add a scare factor, but he didn't interact with anyone. He didn't drink, didn't dance, he just lingered watching people with a cold, unblinking stare. A couple of my friends tried to talk to him, asking where he got his costume and if he was hired for the party, but he would only tilt his head slightly, giving this faint, unsettling smile. After a while, I started to get this weird feeling, like he was watching me in particular. I tried ignoring it, but every time I turned around, I'd catch a glimpse of him, somewhere just within sight, staring in my direction. Eventually, I got fed up and decided to confront him, figuring I could at least get him to break character. I walked up, looked him dead in the eyes and said, "That's a sick costume, man. How'd you make it look so real?" He stared down at me for a long moment before answering in this low, raspy voice that sounded almost strained. "It's not a costume," he said. I half laughed, thinking he was just staying in character, but he didn't even blink, just held that cold, piercing stare. His face was close enough that I could smell this faint, sulfur-like scent, like burned matches. The smell made me back off, feeling a wave of nausea hit me. I muttered something about good commitment to the character and walked away, trying to shake off the weirdness. But for the rest of the night, he kept appearing nearby, always on the edges, his face barely visible in the dim light. It got to the point where I was so unsettled that I went inside, figuring I'd be safer in the crowd. Around midnight, though, someone pointed out that he was gone. No one had seen him leave, but he wasn't anywhere on the rooftop or in the apartment building. Afterward, a few of us tried to ask the hosts if they had hired him, but none of them knew anything about him. No one recognized him, and the neighbors who dropped by swore he hadn't come with them. A couple of the guests even posted photos from the night on social media, but in every single one where he should have been, he just wasn't there, like he disappeared into thin air. To this day, I don't know what he was or why he was there, and every Halloween when I go to parties, I find myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see him, standing quietly in the shadows, watching. Halloween brings out all sorts of characters, and sometimes it can be hard to tell who's just in costume and who might be something else. So this Halloween, if someone's costume looks a bit too real, maybe think twice before you approach. A couple of years ago, I went to a Halloween party at my office building. It wasn't a big, spooky bash or anything, just a small gathering organized by our HR team to boost morale. People showed up in costumes, some snacks and drinks were set out, and everyone had the kind of polite, forced fun you expect at a corporate party. I wasn't in the best mood that night. It was late. I'd stayed after hours to finish a project, and by the time I wrapped up, most of my colleagues had already made their way down to the lobby where the party was. I figured I'd make a quick appearance before heading home. Our office is on the 19th floor, so I stepped into the elevator alone. The building was quiet, eerily so. As the doors slid shut, the fluorescent lights overhead flickered once, twice, then dimmed to a low, humming glow. I figured it was just bad timing. The elevator in our building was notorious for maintenance issues. But as the elevator began descending, the lights flickered again. They dimmed so much that I could barely see my own reflection in the metal doors. Then, for just a split second, I saw something behind me, a shadowy shape hunched over in the corner, barely there before the lights came back on. My heart skipped, but I brushed it off as exhaustion, maybe my mind playing tricks. I turned around, of course, but the elevator was empty, just the faint hum and the harsh light overhead. I faced forward again, telling myself to calm down. The elevator continued down floor by floor, and then the lights flickered again. This time the shadow was closer, right behind me, and though I couldn't make out details, I could feel a presence, someone or something breathing softly, just inches away from the back of my neck. I held my breath, refusing to turn around. The doors were going to open soon, and I kept telling myself I was almost there. But then the elevator stopped, dead. We were on the 13th floor, but the doors didn't open. It was pitch black now, no flickering lights, just complete darkness, and that overwhelming sense of something standing directly behind me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I was stuck there, frozen, listening to the faintest sound of breathing that wasn't mine. Then, a low, raspy voice broke the silence. "Are you going down?" The lights flickered back on, and I finally turned around, expecting to see something. But there was no one. I was alone. A few seconds later, the elevator jerked back to life, continuing its descent like nothing had happened. When the doors opened on the lobby level, I stumbled out breathless and shaken. I tried to tell myself it was just my mind playing tricks in the dark, maybe stress or a bit of paranoia after a long day. But as I walked into the lobby, I noticed something odd. My colleagues were gathered by the entrance, talking in hushed voices, looking concerned. One of them came up to me, and before I could ask, they told me that our maintenance guy Sam had passed away in an accident on the 13th floor just last month. Apparently, he'd gotten trapped in the elevator shaft while fixing a light. I left the party early that night, feeling unsettled. Since then, whenever I stay late, I take the stairs, and I don't work past dark on Halloween. An office Halloween party might seem harmless enough, but sometimes the ghosts of the past are closer than we think. If you're ever alone in an elevator and the lights start to flicker, maybe you're not alone after all. This happened when I was 13, the last Halloween I went trick-or-treating. My friends and I had hit all the houses on our route, and our bags were filled to the brim. It was getting late and most of the neighborhood lights were starting to go off, so we figured it was time to head home. As we were walking back, we noticed a house a few blocks away that still had its lights on, with a bowl of candy left out on the porch. There weren't any decorations, but it was late and we didn't care. We figured we'd grab a few pieces and be on our way. As we walked up the driveway, though, I noticed something odd. A man was standing off to the side, almost hidden in the shadows near the garage. He was just standing there, perfectly still, watching us. He didn't have a costume, just a long coat, and his face was mostly in shadow, so I couldn't make out his features. I thought he was probably the homeowner, maybe just out for a smoke or checking on the bowl. I muttered a happy Halloween, just to be polite, but he didn't respond, just kept staring, motionless. My friends gave each other uneasy looks, but we tried to ignore him. We grabbed a couple of pieces from the bowl, and I remember feeling his eyes on us the whole time, like he was studying us. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up, that instinct that something wasn't right. We turned to leave, walking quickly back down the driveway, but halfway down, one of my friends whispered, "Don't look back." Of course, that made me want to look, but I didn't. I could hear soft footsteps on the gravel behind us, slow and deliberate. It wasn't one of my friends. They were right next to me, hurrying away just as fast as I was. When we reached the street, I finally glanced back, just in time, to see the man standing at the end of the driveway, half hidden in the shadows. He was watching us, his head tilted slightly, like he was trying to decide something. Without a word, we broke into a run, sprinting down the street, until we were out of breath and our legs burned. We kept looking over our shoulders, but we didn't see him again. By the time we reached my friend's house, we were all a little shaken, but we tried to laugh it off, telling ourselves it was probably just some guy messing with us. But here's the thing. The next morning, when we were talking about it, my friend swore she'd seen something strange. She said that when we'd first walked up the driveway, she thought she saw him reaching into the bushes as if he were hiding something. None of us could explain it, and none of us went back to that house to check. It was just one of those Halloween nights where something felt wrong. I still think about it sometimes, wondering if he was really just a homeowner watching over his candy or something else. Halloween can bring out all sorts of strange encounters, some innocent, some not so much. The next time you're out trick-or-treating and someone's just watching, maybe it's best to keep moving. A few years ago, when I was in my mid-20s, my friends and I decided to make the most of Halloween night by exploring parts of the city we usually overlooked. We lived in a bustling urban area filled with bars, clubs, and the typical nightlife. But that evening we craved something different, something that captured the mysterious essence of Halloween. After attending a couple of costume parties, we found ourselves wandering down a quieter street lined with old brick buildings and eclectic shops. The crowd thinned out, and the vibrant sounds of laughter and music faded into the background, replaced by the distant hum of traffic and the rustling of leaves underfoot. As we strolled along, my friend Lisa pointed to a small storefront tucked between a closed antique shop and a dimly lit bookstore. The window was cluttered with faded velvet drapes and an array of peculiar objects, tarnished silver jewelry, aged books with cracked spines, and clusters of crystals catching the faint light. Above the door hung a weathered wooden sign that read, Madame Rosa's Psychic Readings. "Hey, ever had your fortune told?" Lise asked, her eyes gleaming with mischief. I chuckled. "Can't say that I have." "Tonight's the night," my other friend Alex chimed in. "Come on, it'll be fun." I hesitated. Fortune-telling wasn't really my thing, but there was something intriguing about the place. Maybe it was the allure of the unknown, or perhaps just the spirit of Halloween urging me to step outside my comfort zone. "All right," I shrugged. "Why not?" Lisa grinned. "Awesome. Let's check it out." We pushed open the heavy wooden door and a tiny bell jingled overhead. The air inside was warm and carried the scent of incense mixed with something earthy, like dried herbs. The room was dimly lit by clusters of candles placed haphazardly on various surfaces, their flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. The shop was cluttered but cozy. Shelves lined the walls, filled with an assortment of curiosities, glass jars containing what looked like dried plants, antique lanterns, and masks from different cultures. In the center of the room was a round table draped with a deep purple cloth, embroidered with golden stars and moons. "Welcome," a soft voice greeted us. We turned to see a woman emerging from behind a beaded curtain. She appeared to be in her late 50s or early 60s, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back into a loose braid. Her eyes were a captivating shade of grey, sharp yet warm. She wore layers of shawls in rich, earthy tones, and numerous silver bangles adorned her wrists. "Hi," Lisa said cheerfully. "We were just passing by and thought we'd stop in." The woman gave a gentle smile. "On All Hallows' Eve, no less. You've chosen an auspicious night to visit?" I offered a polite nod. We were curious about getting a reading. "Curiosity is the first step to enlightenment," she replied, her gaze settling on me. "Please, have a seat." She gestured toward the table. Lisa and I sat down while Alex wandered off to examine the various items around the shop. "I'm Madame Rosa," she said, taking a seat across from us. "I'm Michael," I replied, "and this is Lisa." She nodded, then reached for a deck of tarot cards resting on the table. The cards looked old, their edges worn, the images on them faded but still vivid. "Is there anything specific you'd like to know?" she asked, beginning to shuffle the cards with practiced ease. I glanced at Lisa, who shrugged. "Not really," I said. "Maybe just general reading?" "Very well." She began laying out the cards in a deliberate pattern, her eyes scanning over each one thoughtfully. The first card was the Fool, depicting a traveler setting out on a journey. The second was the Moon, showing a luminescent moon hanging over a landscape, hinting at illusions and the subconscious. The third card was the Hermit, an old man carrying a lantern, symbolizing introspection. "You stand on the cusp of a new path," Madame Rosa began, her voice smooth and calming. "There is uncertainty ahead, but also the potential for great personal insight." I listened politely, intrigued despite my skepticism. She continued, her gaze flickering up to meet mine occasionally. "However, the presence of the moon suggests that not everything is as it seems. There may be unseen influences or hidden truths that could cloud your judgment." A slight chill ran down my spine, though I couldn't explain why. "Have you been experiencing any unusual occurrences?" she asked softly. I hesitated. "What do you mean?" She tilted her head slightly. "Strange dreams, feelings of déjà vu, perhaps sensing a presence when you're alone." I felt a knot form in my stomach. For the past few weeks, I had had trouble sleeping. I often woke up in the middle of the night, convinced I'd heard whispering or felt a shift in the air, but I'd always brushed it off as stress. Actually, yes, I admitted reluctantly, but I figured it was just work pressure getting to me. Madame Rosa regarded me carefully. Sometimes the veil between worlds is thinner than we realize, especially on nights like this. Lisa leaned forward, her interest piqued. What does that mean? It means, she said, choosing her words deliberately, that certain energies may be drawn to you, not harmful, but perhaps restless. I tried to keep my tone light. So, are you saying I'm being haunted? She smiled gently. Not haunted, dear, more like noticed. Alex rejoined us then, breaking the tension. This place is wild, he said, holding up a small carved figurine. You find anything out? Just that I might have an admirer from beyond, I joked. Madame Rosa reached into a small box on the table and pulled out a thin silver chain with a small pendant. A simple circle enclosing a triangle. This is a talisman, she explained. It may help you find balance and clarity. I started to protest, not sure I wanted to accept it, but Lisa nudged me. Take it, she whispered. Can't hurt, right? I accepted the necklace, feeling the cool metal against my palm. Thank you, I said. She nodded. Remember, the unknown is not always something to fear, but something to understand. We paid for the reading, more out of courtesy than anything else, and made our way back outside. The air felt crisper, and the street seemed quieter than before. Well, that was interesting, Alex remarked. Definitely adds to the Halloween vibe, Lisa agreed. I slipped the necklace into my pocket, not sure how I felt about the whole experience. Part of me dismissed it as theatrics, but another part couldn't shake the unease that had settled in. Over the next few days, the strange occurrences intensified. Objects in my apartment seemed slightly out of place. Doors I'd left closed were found ajar, and that sense of being watched grew stronger. One night, as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a faint whisper, a barely audible voice that seemed to be saying my name. I sat up abruptly, heart pounding, but the room was silent. The shadows seemed deeper, the darkness more oppressive. Remembering the talisman, I retrieved it from my bedside table and put it on. The cool metal against my skin brought a slight comfort, and eventually I fell into an uneasy sleep. The following day, I told Lisa about what had been happening. Maybe we should go back to Madame Rosa's, she suggested, to see if she can help. I agreed. That evening, we returned to the street where the shop was located, but when we arrived, the storefront was different. The window displays were gone, and the sign had changed to "For Lease." Confused, we double-checked the address. It was definitely the same place. That's weird, Lisa said. Maybe she moved. We decided to inquire at the neighboring bookstore. Inside, an elderly man was arranging books on a shelf. Excuse me, I began. Do you know what happened to Madame Rosa's shop next door? He gave me a puzzled look. Madame Rosa? There's been no business there for years. The place has been empty since I can remember. I exchanged a glance with Lisa. But we were just there a few days ago, I insisted. He shook his head slowly. I'm afraid you must be mistaken. We left the bookstore feeling unsettled. As we walked back to the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Do you think she was a ghost? Lisa asked half-jokingly. I didn't answer. That night, the disturbances escalated. The whispers became more frequent, shadows seemed to move on their own, and at times I felt a cold breath against my neck. Desperate, I searched online for any information about Madame Rosa. I found an old newspaper article dated over 20 years ago. It reported a fire that had broken out in a small fortune teller's shop on that very street. The owner, a woman named Rosa Martinez, had perished in the blaze. A chill settled over me as I read the article. The accompanying photo showed the same woman we'd met, the silver-streaked hair, the piercing grey eyes. I reached out to Lisa and Alex, sharing what I'd discovered. They were equally disturbed. What do we do now? Alex asked. I don't know, I admitted. But I think I need to find a way to set things right. Remembering her words about the unknown being something to understand, I decided to visit a local spiritual shop. There, I spoke with a woman who specialized in cleansing rituals. After explaining my situation, careful to omit details that might make me sound crazy, she recommended a simple cleansing ceremony. She provided me with sage, instructing me on how to use it to purify my space and intentions. That evening, I followed her instructions meticulously. As I moved through my apartment, the air felt lighter, and the oppressive sensation began to lift. I held the talisman in my hand, thanking whatever forces were at play for their guidance and expressing a desire for peace. Over the next few days, the disturbances subsided. The whispers faded, and the shadows returned to being just shadows. I kept the talisman not as a protective charm, but as a reminder of the experience. To this day, I don't fully understand what happened. Perhaps it was a series of coincidences, or maybe there are things beyond our comprehension. Every Halloween since, I think back to that night, the mysterious shop, Madame Rosa's knowing gaze, and her cryptic advice. One thing is certain, the boundary between the known and the unknown is thinner than we might believe, and sometimes curiosity can lead us to places we aren't fully prepared to go. Sometimes the most unassuming places hold the deepest mysteries. This Halloween, if you find yourself drawn to the unknown, remember that some doors, once opened, can't easily be closed. Stay curious, but tread carefully, because not every encounter is left behind when the night ends. A few Halloweens ago, my friends and I decided to do something different. Instead of the usual parties or bar hopping, we planned to go for a night hike at a nature reserve near our town. It sounded a little crazy, but we'd done hikes at night before, and Halloween felt like the perfect night for something adventurous. It was around 11 p.m. when we parked near the trailhead and set off, flashlights in hand. The trail was quiet, winding through dense trees with leaves crunching underfoot. The moon was bright enough to light our path, so we kept our flashlights off, talking and laughing as we walked. We'd been hiking for about 20 minutes when we came to a small clearing. We stopped to catch our breath, taking in the eerie beauty of the trees silhouetted against the moonlit sky. That's when Leah, one of my friends, nudged me and whispered, "Hey, do you see that?" I followed her gaze to the far side of the clearing, and there, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure. It looked like someone standing near the edge of the trees just outside the moonlight's reach. My first thought was that it was another hiker, but then I noticed the faint glint of white on their face and the outline of baggy, colorful clothes. It looked like a clown costume. "Probably someone trying to freak us out," I muttered, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The figure didn't move, and they just stood there, perfectly still, watching us. My friends and I exchanged nervous glances, half expecting the person to jump out or shout something, but they remained silent. After a few tense moments, we decided to keep walking, telling ourselves it was just someone playing a Halloween prank. Still, we quickened our pace, sticking a bit closer together. As we made our way back to the trail, we tried to brush off the encounter, laughing it off as a harmless Halloween scare. But after a few minutes, I heard a rustling sound to our left. We all stopped, turning our flashlights toward the sound. There, in the shadows, was another clown. This one was closer to the trail, half hidden behind a tree. They were silent too, just watching. "This is getting weird," Leah whispered, her voice shaky. "Maybe it's a group prank," I said, though my heart was pounding. "Some guys dressed up and planned to scare hikers or something." We started walking again, a bit faster this time. I could feel the tension building in the group. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves had us on edge, and I could tell my friends were as uncomfortable as I was. A few minutes later, we heard another sound, this time behind us. We turned, and there, standing just off the trail, was a third clown. They were closer than the others, their white face paint almost glowing in the dim light, their eyes fixed on us. It was like they were waiting, watching. "All right, this isn't funny," one of my friends muttered, clearly freaked out. The clowns still didn't move or make a sound. They just stood there. "Let's go back," Leah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now." No one argued. We turned and started walking quickly back the way we'd come, trying to ignore the feeling of eyes on us. The forest was darker than before, and every shadow seemed to stretch and move. My hands were sweating, and I could tell from the silence around me that my friends were just as scared. After what felt like forever, we finally saw the trailhead up ahead, and relief washed over me. But as we got closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. I glanced back one last time, and for just a second, I saw them. 3 clowns standing among the trees, their painted faces just barely visible in the moonlight, watching as we left. We didn't stop to talk about it once we got to the car. We just piled in and drove away, the tension thick in the air. When we were finally back on the main road, Leah broke the silence. Do you think they were real? None of us knew what to say. Maybe it was just some people out pulling a prank on Halloween. Or maybe it was something else. Either way, none of us have gone back to those woods since. And every Halloween, I think about those clowns standing in the trees, silent, waiting, and I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't turned back. Sometimes the simplest plans can take an unexpected, chilling turn. If you're ever out on Halloween and see something unusual watching you from the trees, it might be wise to trust your instincts and turn back. It was Halloween night and I was home alone with my 8-month-old daughter Lily. My husband was out of town, and since Lily had been a bit fussy with a cold, I decided to stay in, just to keep an eye on her. The trick-or-treaters had gone home hours ago, and the house was still and quiet, with nothing but the sound of the occasional creak as it settled in the autumn cold. I had just checked on Lily and settled onto the couch with a book, keeping the baby monitor next to me. Every so often I glanced at the monitor's screen, which showed Lily asleep in her crib. Her soft, rhythmic breathing crackled quietly over the monitor, a gentle reminder that she was safe and sound. It was close to midnight when I first heard it, a low, distant murmur coming through the monitor. At first, I thought it was just the usual static, but as I leaned in, I realized that there was something else there, a faint, rhythmic whisper, the words too soft to understand, almost like humming. The sound was too low to make out, so I turned up the volume slightly. It didn't help. The voice was quiet, muffled, as if someone were whispering just beyond the microphone's reach, soft but insistent, repeating something over and over. I strained to listen, catching fragments of words that seemed just out of reach, like trying to remember something half forgotten. I checked the monitor screen again. Lily was exactly as she had been, lying still, eyes closed, sound asleep. The room looked empty, undisturbed, the nightlight casting a soft glow over her crib. The whispering continued, barely audible, a low murmur that seemed to fill the room with a quiet tension. I turned the monitor up another notch, my heart pounding as I caught another fragment, a word that made my skin prickle. Closer. I felt a wave of unease, my mind racing with excuses. Interference maybe? A neighbor's monitor picking up the same channel? I tried to convince myself it was nothing but the sound. It was right there, close, like it was meant for me alone to hear. The whispering shifted, becoming more focused, almost curious, almost ready. I took a shaky breath, feeling a cold sweat prickling along my skin. I checked the monitor again, my eyes scanning the screen, the shadows, the corners of the room. There was nothing there, nothing at all. Then I heard it again, faint but unmistakable, like a voice speaking in my ear. Don't turn around. A chill ran down my spine. I wanted to turn and look over my shoulder to reassure myself there was no one there, but the fear rooted me in place. I kept my eyes on the screen, staring at Lily's crib, her tiny body peaceful and oblivious, while that whisper drifted through the monitor, soft and insistent. So close. The words sent an ice-cold dread straight through me. I felt like I was being watched, like someone was standing right behind me, just outside of my line of sight, watching and waiting. I forced myself to breathe, gripping the monitor tightly, fighting the urge to look. Finally, the whispering faded, dissolving into static. The room was silent again, but the unease lingered, pressing down on me. I didn't move, didn't dare to make a sound, as if whatever presence had been there was still just beyond the edge of my vision. I don't know how long I stayed that way, frozen, my eyes fixed on the screen, on Lily, reassuring myself she was safe. When I finally gathered the courage to move, I crept to her room and brought her out, holding her close on the couch, unwilling to let her out of my sight. Halloween night has a way of unsettling even the safest places. If you ever hear a voice that shouldn't be there, a whisper in the quiet, take heed. Sometimes what we can't see is closer than we think. When I was 16, I experienced something on Halloween night that still sends chills down my spine whenever I think about it. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, trusting me enough to leave me home alone for the first time. I assured them I'd be fine. After all, I was practically an adult. Besides, I was looking forward to having the house to myself. The evening started off uneventful. I handed out candy to trick-or-treaters until about 9 p.m., when the steady stream of costumed kids began to taper off. With the house finally quiet, I decided to indulge in a horror movie marathon. I queued up some classics, The Ring and The Exorcist, figuring they'd provide the perfect atmosphere for Halloween. The Ring had always creeped me out, but watching it alone added a new layer of tension. Every creak of the house seemed amplified. Every rustle outside made me glance toward the window. Still, I brushed it off. Old houses make noises, and the wind was picking up outside. By the time I started The Exorcist, it was close to midnight. The house felt colder, so I grabbed a blanket and settled back onto the couch. As the movie delved into its more unsettling scenes, I began to feel an odd unease, like someone was watching me. I told myself it was just the movie getting to me. Then I heard it, a faint thump from above. I paused the film and listened intently. Silence. Probably just the house settling, I thought. I resumed the movie, but a few minutes later, there it was again. A soft, distinct thump, followed by what sounded like faint shuffling. My heart started to race. We didn't have any pets, and I was definitely alone. I muted the TV and sat in silence, ears straining. For a few moments, nothing. Just as I began to relax, the noise came again, louder this time. A dragging sound like something heavy being pulled across the attic floor. I told myself it had to be a raccoon or maybe a stray cat that somehow got in. Gathering some courage, I decided to check it out, if only to put my mind at ease. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and made my way to the second floor, each step feeling heavier than the last. Standing at the bottom of the pull-down attic ladder, I hesitated. The attic entrance loomed above me, the hatch closed, but the noises more audible. Soft, scraping sounds, irregular but persistent. I contemplated calling my parents, but dismissed the idea. I didn't want them to think I couldn't handle being alone. Taking a deep breath, I pulled the cord. The ladder unfolded with a creak that echoed down the hallway. I shone the flashlight into the dark void above. "Hello?" I called out weakly, immediately feeling foolish. No response. I climbed the first few rungs, the beam of the flashlight cutting through the dust particles that floated like tiny spectres. The attic was cluttered with old furniture, boxes of forgotten items, and covered furniture draped in white sheets that looked ghostly in the dim light. "Is anyone there?" I whispered. Silence. I was about to convince myself it was nothing when, from the far corner of the attic, I heard a faint giggle, a child's laugh, barely audible but unmistakable. Every hair on my body stood on end. I swept the flashlight toward the sound, but saw nothing beyond the silhouettes of stored belongings. My mind raced. Maybe it was an open window carrying sounds from outside, but the attic windows were sealed shut. They had been for years. Then, slowly, one of the sheet-covered chairs began to move. It was subtle, a slight rocking back and forth. I froze, my grip tightening on the ladder. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice cracking. The chair stopped moving. The attic was plunged into a suffocating silence. My instincts screamed at me to get out of there. Backing down the ladder as quickly as I could without falling, I nearly tripped as I hit the hallway floor. I shoved the ladder back up, the hatch snapping closed. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I retreated to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. I grabbed my cell phone and dialed my dad's number. It was late and I hated to wake him, but I didn't know what else to do. He answered groggily. "Hey, everything okay?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "Dad, I think there's someone in the house, in the attic." There was a pause. "Are you sure? Did you see anyone?" I hesitated. "I heard noises and I think I heard a child laughing." He was silent for a moment. "We're 3 hours away, but I'll call Mr. Thompson next door to come check on you. Stay in your room, keep the door locked." I agreed, feeling a slight relief. Mr. Thompson was a retired police officer, a sturdy, no-nonsense kind of guy. After hanging up, I sat on my bed, every creak of the house magnified in the silence. Minutes felt like hours. Then, just outside my bedroom door, I heard soft footsteps, a slow, deliberate tread moving down the hallway. I pressed myself against the wall, eyes locked on the doorknob. The footsteps stopped right outside. I held my breath. The knob rattled gently as if someone were testing it. Then a whisper so quiet I almost missed it. "Let me in." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The doorknob rattled again, more insistently this time. I fumbled for something, anything to defend myself with, and grabbed a heavy book from my nightstand. Suddenly there was a loud knock at the front door downstairs. The rattling stopped. Silence. "Jason, it's Mr. Thompson." Relief flooded over me. I sprinted to the window overlooking the front yard and saw him standing on the porch, illuminated by the streetlight. I yelled back, "I'm coming." I paused at my bedroom door, listening. Nothing. I unlocked it and crept into the hallway. It was empty. I hurried down the stairs and let Mr. Thompson in, explaining everything in a rush of words. He checked the house thoroughly, including the attic. After a tense half hour, he found no signs of anyone. "All the windows and doors are locked from the inside," he said gently. "Maybe it was just the wind. Old houses can be noisy." I wanted to believe him, but the look in his eyes told me he sensed my genuine fear. He offered to stay the night on the couch, and I gratefully accepted. The rest of the night was quiet. I didn't hear any more noises, and eventually exhaustion took over, and I fell asleep. In the morning, over breakfast, Mr. Thompson mentioned something that still unsettles me. "You know," he began carefully, "years ago, before your family moved in, there was talk about this place being, well, haunted." I laughed nervously. "Really?" "Couple that lived here before claimed they heard noises too. Even said they saw a little girl in the house sometimes." I felt a chill run down my spine. "A little girl?" He nodded. "But you know how stories go. Probably just the imagination running wild." We never spoke of it again. I told my parents a watered-down version of the night's events, not wanting them to worry or revoke my newfound independence. But ever since that Halloween night, I can't shake the feeling that I'm not alone in that house. And sometimes, late at night, I think I can still hear soft footsteps in the attic and a faint giggle echoing down the halls. Being home alone can be unsettling, especially on Halloween night when our imaginations are already on edge. But sometimes the things we dismiss as mere sounds of an old house may have a more unsettling origin. So, if you ever find yourself hearing unexplained noises, think twice before brushing them off, because you never know who or what might be sharing your home. And that's it for tonight's journey into Halloween night horrors. These stories remind us that sometimes what feels like just a night of costumes and fun has a darker side lingering in the shadows. Thank you for joining me here on Char TV, where we dive into the strange, the spooky, and the unexplained. If you're enjoying these haunted tales, don't forget to hit subscribe. We're building something special here, a channel dedicated to the eerie and the unknown, and we'd love for you to be part of it. Until next time, keep an eye out for what goes bump in the night. Happy Halloween, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that feel a little too real.